Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we are going to be cooking up some super hot fire. That's why I got the A1 steak sauce behind me. We're going to be talking about some must-own second-year wide receivers for fantasy football in 2021. Now, that's just the title of this video. We're going to be talking about more than the guys that I really like, and we're going to go in depth on a majority of the second-year wide receivers who got drafted in the 2020 NFL Draft. We're going to be talking about Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Chase Claypool, Brandon Ayuk, Jerry Jeudy, T. Higgins, Michael Pittman, Denzel, Mimsy, Henry Ruggs, and Laviska Shenault in this video. Obviously, that's not every wide receiver, because if we did every single one, some of them would be certified snooze fests, and the other ones just would make the video take very, very long. So if you guys do want me to discuss any of the other players and you want some information about them, kind of my thought process behind these players, make sure to ask down below in the comments. I love to talk to you guys down below in the comment section. I always try to answer every single comment. So before we go deep into this must-own second-year wide receivers video, I want to ask if that at any point inside this video, if you guys are new and you end up enjoying, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. I post new content every single day surrounding around fantasy football, NFL, and the NFL draft. So please make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. But let's get into it. We begin at numero 1 here. Now, these guys are not necessarily really in any order. Just kind of the guys I'm most interested in are going to be early, and then T. Higgins, who I really like, is a bit later because I already kind of had a video discussing him. So Justin Jefferson played in 16 games last season and finished as wide receiver 6 in PPR, 6.5 PPR, as well as wide receiver 6 in standard. He got that 666 like he's the devil, or maybe Drake, averaging 17.1 PPR points per game, 14.4 half PPR points per game, and 11.6 standard points per game. Meaning, on a points per game perspective, he finished as wide receiver 9 in PPR, 8.5 PPR, and wide receiver 9 in standard. Now, why I kind of bring up these points per game stats is because your finishing spot on the year is pretty fucking deceptive, in my opinion, because some of these guys, they don't play 16 games, right? And they finish lower, but when they were in your lineup, when they were healthy, they were very good. Other guys, they play 16 games, they finish high. Why? Because the other guys were hurt and they didn't play as well, but the fact that they played 16 games elevated them up. Now, that was not the case with Justin Jefferson, finishing pretty close inside the top 10 in every single format, in both finish on the season as well as on a points per game basis. So Justin Jefferson is kind of the opposite of why we kind of make the deception, like the movie, maybe? Deciphering between the two kind of numbers. So, Justin Jefferson, 6'1", 202 pounds out of LSU. First round pick last season, 22 years old going into this year. I love Justin Jefferson, and it should be obvious. Justin Jefferson is likely going to be a top 12 wide receiver coming off the board in your fantasy drafts. Right now, his underdog ADP, which is where I play best ball leagues. If you guys want to join me on there, make sure you use the link down below or code NOTORIOUS when you sign up. It helps me out a ton. His ADP is 22.1, so he is a second round pick right now based upon their ADP. So what do I really think about Justin Jefferson? Again, I said he was very, very good last year, and I was a huge fan of him. Going into the year, I really thought it would take a decent amount of time for Justin Jefferson to really skyrocket, as a lot of these rookie guys, I was thinking, you know what, it's a COVID offseason. They didn't have as much time. They didn't have the rookie training camps. They weren't having all these things that are just normal in most NFL seasons. He frankly just did not have. But really, it only took 2 weeks for him to play all right. And then week number 3, this guy blasted off directly into the moon. Week 1 against Green Bay, only scored 4 points. Week 2 against Indianapolis, only scored 7 points. But week 3 against Tennessee is when the moon shot began for Mr. Justin Jefferson, covered by the notorious Malcolm Butler against Tennessee. This man had 9 targets, 7 receptions, 1 touchdown, and 175 receiving yards for 30.5 fantasy points, aka becoming the number 2 fantasy wide receiver on the week. And he did have multiple games that were kind of identical to that, where he goes absolutely ham. Week 12 up against Carolina, this man has 2 touchdowns and 70 yards with 7 catches. Up against Jacksonville against Trey Herndon, 9 receptions, 13 targets, 1 touchdown, 121 receiving yards. again, another beast of a game. This guy was very consistent throughout last season. On a season finish, he had 125 targets, 16th most at the wide receiver position. He had a grand total of 88 receptions, 13th at the wide receiver position, 1,400 receiving yards, 3rd most at the wide receiver position, and 7 total touchdowns, 19th most at the wide receiver position. So obviously, Justin Jefferson was great. Now, there is definitely some talk about, oh, who are the Vikings going to draft? Are they going to trade up and draft a guy like Trey Lance, do all this stuff? Regardless, it should be Kirk Cousins, even with Adam Thielen there, and with the team not airing the ball out as much as you would obviously like if you're an owner of Justin Jefferson. I do believe that he will be able to repeat as a top 12 finisher in fantasy football in 2021. Maybe he regresses in terms of yards, but I think there's potential that Jefferson is one of those guys that drops 10 plus touchdowns on a yearly basis. I think Justin Jefferson is kind of a no-brainer of a breakdown. He was really good last year in his rookie year, again with the COVID protocols. With all this stuff, that kind of make it so you're not going to have a great year. He still ends up breaking free, soaring and flying. So I believe Justin Jefferson is going to be great again. Obviously going to be a must-own second-year wide receiver in 2021 fantasy leagues. Next up, we got CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver of the Dallas Cowboys. In 16 games last season, he finished as wide receiver 24 in PPR, 24.5 PPR, 20 in standard, averaging 13.2 PPR points per game, 10.9 half PPR points per game, 8 standard points per game. And from a points per game perspective, he was wide receiver 35 in PPR, 34.5 PPR, and 32 in standard. This is more of a case where a guy gets elevated on a finish based upon playing all 16 games that I talked about a little earlier. But what is so good about CeeDee Lamb, this 6'2" absolute unit of a man, 198 pounds, 22 years old, just like Justin Jefferson? Well, I want to take a look at the beginning of the year versus the end of the year. As you guys know, Mr. Dakota Prescott ended up getting hurt week 5 up against the New York Football Giants. And after that, the Giants' offense wasn't necessarily studded because they weren't complete shit, right? They were still able to do stuff, even with Gucci Danucci under center, Andy Dalton, Gilbert Godfrey. It didn't really seem to matter, and they were still all right. But obviously, this offense was pumping teams in the ass without the use of lube early on in the season. Week 1 against LA drops 10 fantasy points. Week 2 against Atlanta, 17.5. 3 against Seattle, 11.6. 25.2 against Cleveland. And against Giants, 20.4 points. So he was a top 20 finisher in a majority of those games. But then once Dak gets hurt, it kind of goes down. It really does. He's dropping like 13 points, 12 points, 10 points, 13 points. His best game after Dak got hurt was 23.4 up against the Philadelphia Eagles. So when you think about it, it seems like CeeDee Lamb should be much better in 2021 with a healthy Dak Prescott. Hopefully, they end up drafting some defensive pieces so that the defense actually does something, because the defense was awful last year. If you guys remember, even when Dak is keeping these guys in the game, the defense is just getting brutally fucked left and right and not being able to do anything. But if that is the case again, it might be even better for CeeDee Lamb, because they're going to have to be crawling back into these games. CeeDee Lamb last season finished with a grand total of 109 targets, 24th at wide receiver, for 74 receptions, 23rd at wide receiver, and 935 receiving yards, 22nd at wide receiver for 6 total touchdowns. So CeeDee Lamb was kind of an obvious pick that he was going to be good. He was drafted in the first round, going to a high-octane offense in Dallas, but the questions were still there, obviously. Can he perform with Cooper, Gallup, and him? Because Gallup had an amazing 2019 season. If you guys go back and you think about how good he played, it was like, holy shit, he's going to be the number 3 on this offense, but he passed Gallup pretty easily. And while I think Gallup is a good player, Lamb just easily beat him out, and I think CeeDee Lamb is in for another big season. Am I in love with him? Not necessarily, because I think that having that many weapons is kind of tough. If they draft Kyle Pitts, I will frankly have no idea what to think of all of these wide receivers, because Pitts is going to suck up a bunch of targets as well. Again, I doubt he makes it that far. The Dallas Cowboys have the 10th pick. He's projected to be a top 5, top 6 pick, so I highly doubt it, but obviously that is something to note. Again, CeeDee Lamb is very talented, and where he's going right now on Underdog is pick 39.8, so he's a very valid pick at that point, so I definitely do like him in terms of fantasy football. Next guy up on the docket is Chase Claypool, wide receiver of the Pittsburgh Steelers. We're about 10 minutes into this video, so if you guys have ended up enjoying, we've still got a bunch of time to go. If you're new, please make sure to hit that subscribe button, and if you're not new, make sure to hit that like button. Chase Claypool currently coming off the board, according to Underdog. Again, make sure you use my link down in the description if you sign up for them and do some best ball drafts with me. 63.7 is his ADP. Last season, he finished as wide receiver number 22 in 16 games in PPR, 19.5 PPR, and wide receiver 14 in the standard format. 13.4 PPR points per game, 11.5 half PPR points per game, and 9.6 standard points per game. You flip that around, you get 6.9. Very nice. I like. From a points per game perspective, he finished as wide receiver 34 in PPR, 29.5 PPR, as well as wide receiver number 21 in standard. Now, Chase Claypool, to me, definitely took a hit from fucking Rocky when Juju Smith-Schuster ended up re-signing. While I know Chase Claypool and him are TikTok boys together, Corvette, I thought that maybe he would be gone. He would go to Kansas City, maybe take a slight pay cut and, you know, go win the fucking Super Bowl or something. But no, he decides to go back to Pittsburgh, which definitely hurts Claypool because it was Claypool and Johnson, and Juju Sneaky was pretty good last year, so this does definitely hurt Chase Claypool. Does it hurt him enough for me not to want to draft him? No, but I wouldn't be surprised if it went real south for one of these three wide receivers, as they're all going to be probably top 5 round picks. Besides maybe Juju, because, you know, his stocks are definitely falling when it comes to fantasy. Chase Claypool, 6'4", 238 pounds, out of Notre Dame, 22.8 years old, and he is the first player we're going to be talking about that was not drafted inside of the first round of the NFL draft. Pick number 17 inside of the second round. Now, last year, Claypool went crazy. 109 targets, 24th most at the wide receiver position, 62 receptions, 35th most, 859 receiving yards, 29th at the wide receiver position, and 11 total touchdowns, 5th most at the wide receiver position. Now, you may not say he broke out yet, because the way to determine a breakout player to me is so fucking up in the air. Some people be like, oh, if he gets 900 yards, that's a breakout. Over 1,000 yards is a breakout. 1,100 yards is a breakout. To me, he looked good enough to have already broken out in his rookie season in his NFL career. I think that Chase Claypool is going to easily be able to do it again, but I do put a warning stamp on him. I'm nervous about multiple things. One, that they have so many good weapons there. 2, that Big Ben may eventually just fucking collapse. This guy comes into every single week on the injury report. He's wearing like a brace for his arm, a brace for his leg, a brace for his back. This guy probably gets fucking probably has cavities every week too or something because of how much this guy's hurt. Do I think that it's gonna all collapse this year? I don't know. I don't think so, because Big Ben seems like he's sneaky one of those guys that's going to be able to play for a while, even though you think it's all going to come burning down for the guy. But again, with so many weapons there, Claypool isn't one of those sexy picks to me like Justin Jefferson is, but he is a guy that, when I draft him, 100%, but am I, like, getting rock hard clicking draft on this guy? No. But I do still think Chase Claypool will be pretty solid, and knock on wood, if something was to happen to Deontay Johnson or Juju Smith-Schuster, the kind of shot up to fucking Uranus, you know, the planet, obviously, would be pretty high for Mr. Chase Claypool. At number 4, we got Brandon Aiyuk, wide receiver of the San Francisco 49ers, 6 feet tall, 205 pounds, out of Arizona State, first round pick, got picked near the end of the first round at pick number 25 to the 49ers. Last year, Aiyuk played in 12 total games, finishing as wide receiver 35 in PPR, 33.5 PPR, and wide receiver 33 in standard, averaging 15.4 PPR points per game, 12.9 half PPR points per game, and 10.4 standard points per game, meaning on a points per game perspective, he was wide receiver 18 in PPR, 17.5 PPR, and 14 in standard. So this is kind of the reverse case, where a guy doesn't play that many games, so he finishes low on the wide receiver standings, but when looking at it, when this guy's healthy, he's balling out. Now, there's going to be comments, oh, but Nick, Brandon Aiyuk isn't going to be able to perform when Debo's healthy. Nick, you fucking idiot. You got to think about that. Well, if you look into it, he played just fine with Debo healthy. Some games better, some games slightly worse, but you're not going to see some tremendous regression when it comes to Brandon Aiyuk with Debo on the field. Now, something that will definitely change this year is who the fuck the quarterback is, right? We don't know who it's going to be. Probably not going to be Jimmy G. They move up to pick number 3. Is that to select Mac Jones? That's the favorite right now. But they are going to see Trey Lance and Justin Fields' second pro day next week. So, do they draft Mac Jones? Do they draft Justin Fields? Do they draft Trey Lance? I don't know. And my opinion on Ayuk may end up changing based on who they end up drafting, but I think he should be fine regardless, coming off the board as pick number 58, according to Underdog ADP. Personally, I'd actually much rather take the shot on Deebo Samuel later in drafts because he's not the sexier pick, right? We saw Ayuk, the rookie sensation, this, that, and the other thing. People love to draft younger players. Deebo's only played in the league for one more year than Ayuk, but that's just how it is. And they saw Ayuk play so hot last season. We didn't see much of Deebo, but I still think Deebo is going to be able to be very good in 2021. But this video is not about Deebo Samuel, so we'll suck off Brandon Ayuk a little bit here. Ayuk last year played a decent amount in the slot, 14% of the time in the slot, but he's not necessarily just a slot wide receiver. 97 targets last season, 37th most at the wide receiver position, 60 receptions, 38th most at the wide receiver position for a grand total of 748 receiving yards and 7 total touchdowns, 19th most at the wide receiver position. So Ayuk didn't really burst onto the scene and look tremendous, right? Kind of closer stats to Claypool than to Jefferson. Obviously, Jefferson just had an amazing year. To me, I thought that was going to be hard to do year one again, but with Diggs being gone, it kind of made sense. It was like, fucking, how stupid am I, realistically, looking back at Jefferson? Like, it's so fucking obvious. Diggs leaves. Jefferson slotted into the same spot. I mean, it was obvious, but I frankly did not see it. But yeah, going back to Ayuk, I think that this 49ers team is going to be pretty good. Last year, Ayuk was able to do it even without Jimmy Garoppolo being healthy a majority of the season. They had, oh man, their quarterback's name, Big Dick CJ Beathard was in there. They had another guy in there. It was like a shit show, but at the end of the day, Ayuk was still able to perform, and so he should be able to do it with a better quarterback, hopefully coming in the 2021 NFL Draft. Next up here, we got Jerry Jeudy, the second wide receiver taken off the board in the 2021 NFL Draft. 6'1", pick 15 in the NFL Draft out of Alabama, 22 years old. Underdog ADP 89.1. Now, when we look at Jerry Jeudy, we are seeing a whole lot of opportunity with a very little amount of production from what he was given. I say this because Jeudy was given a lot of targets, 113, 21st most at the wide receiver position, but only picked up 52 receptions. We're going to talk a little bit more about the stats in a minute because we got to talk about his finish first, obviously. Finished as wide receiver 45 in PPR, 44.5 PPR, and wide receiver 43 in standard in 16 games, averaging 9.8 PPR points per game, 8.2 half PPR points per game, and 6 standard points per game. From a points per game perspective, meaning he finished as wide receiver 59 in that, 57 in half PPR, 59 in PPR, and 57 in standard. So, given a lot of opportunity, doesn't do much with it. Now, my projection for Jerry Jeudy is also going to depend on the quarterback position. Is Jerry Jeudy going to be quarterbacked by Drew Lock? Is it going to be Mac Jones? Is it going to be Trey Lance? Is it going to be Justin Fields? I don't know. I think that Jerry Jeudy is very talented. Everything I saw out of Alabama would tell you that this guy is potentially the best wide receiver in this 2021 or 2020 NFL draft class. But what we saw in the field were drops. But we also saw a lot of missed throws from Drew Lock, so it's very hard to kind of decide how I feel about him. Where he's going in the draft, he's certainly worth a shot. 100% worth a shot that this guy goes back to being what he was at Alabama, going back to being amazing again. At Alabama, his final year in 2019, 13 games, 77 targets, 102 targets, 77 receptions, over 1,000 yards, 1,163 receiving yards, and 10 touchdowns. Looked very good. Is he going to be able to go back to that? I don't know. I mean, his catch rate in college, pretty good, 75.5%, 74.7% in his sophomore year. So he should be able to do it again, but he had 8 drops last year. That's half a drop per game. So every other game, he's dropping the ball. 7th most at the wide receiver position. So it's kind of scary because we didn't see that in college. But I do think at the end of the day, Jeudy will be able to overcome the adversity of Horsecock Drew Lock being so shit in some games, being really good in others. I think Jeudy should be fine. But I understand why a lot of people are kind of nervous on Jerry Jeudy. So let me know down below if you guys are or more in on Jerry Jeudy, you're more out, or you're kind of like me where it's like, you know what, at the value, I'll draft him. I'm not fucking going to get married to Jerry Jeudy. I'm not going to tell you Jerry Jeudy's a league winner. He's a fucking, you got to draft this guy every time. at pick 89. No. But I do think he's worth a shot in the heart, but you're too late. Given love. A bad name, I believe, are the lyrics to that song. Next up, we got my boy, Titty Boy, T. Higgins, wide receiver of the Cincinnati Bengals, underdog ADP 48, picked inside of the second round last year. 6'4", 216 pounds, 22 years old, out of Clemson. Now, T. Higgins is not in a scenario of the quarterback's going to change. We're in a scenario of, there could be another wide receiver added there. While me and all the people not named the Bengals probably want them to draft a tackle, protect Joseph Burrow. But there's a lot of talk. They're going to draft Ja'Marr Chase. They're going to draft Kyle Pitts. And in that case, I am running the fuck away from T. Higgins. I still think he can perform, but where he's going in drafts, no way, Jose, am I drafting that man if there is another weapon there. Tyler Boyd is very good, but if they had Kyle Pitts or Ja'Marr Chase, I am fucking scared. Higgins finished as wide receiver 28 in PPR last year, playing 16 games, 30 in half PPR, wide receiver 28 in standard, averaging 12.2 PPR points per game, 10.1 half PPR points per game, and 8 standard points per game. From a points per game perspective, he finished as wide receiver 40 in PPR, 39 half PPR, and 47 in standard leagues. Now, he definitely played much better with Joe Burrow under center, and that should obviously be noted. I went super in deep on T. Higgins a couple of videos ago, so we're not going to dive super deep into this one. The guy finished with a grand total of 107 targets, 28th at wide receiver, 67 receptions, 29th at wide receiver, 908 receiving yards, 26th most at wide receiver, and 6 total touchdowns, 24th most at wide receiver. But with Joe Burrow, he was looking much better, and with a healthy Joe Burrow, I predict that T. Higgins should be good. But again, I don't want to go super deep, dive in fucking deep, get my scuba gear on, and dive in, okay? Because we don't know what's going to happen in the draft. So if they draft Pitts, they draft fucking Ja'Marr Chase, I'm not drafting T. Higgins, probably. Maybe I'll get suckered into doing it, but I probably won't be loving him. McDonald's, I'm loving it type deal. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think about Titty Boy T. Higgins. Next up, we got Michael Pittman Jr., number 11 on the Indianapolis Colts. That's Mr. Wentz's number, but Pittman literally alphaed the fuck out of Carson Wentz. He told Carson Wentz, Dikembe, no, you are not getting my number. I am number 11, which was hilarious. So, Pittman, wide receiver out of USC, 6'4", 223 pounds, 23 and a half years old out of USC, second round draft pick last year, going off the board on Underdog as pick 100.5. So he's going much later than any of these other guys. And the biggest question mark with Pittman is really that there's really no one around him that's that great to where I wouldn't want to draft him. But the question is Wentz going to be able to be the Wentz of the past, or is he going to look like Wentz last year? And frankly, I don't know. I'm going to project that Wentz is going to be better than last year because Wentz looked like a chicken with his fucking head cut off last year. He did not look like the Wentz of the past. But has Wentz really been good since that potential MVP season? No. But you also have to understand last year that the team around Wentz was terrible. The line was not very good. The wide receivers fucking sucked. So can you really hate Wentz off that? No. To the point where I like Pittman. A decent amount where he's going at pick 100 right now. In 13 games, Pittman finished as wide receiver, 78 in PPR, 80 in half PPR, 86 in standard, averaging 7.6 PPR points per game, 6.1 half PPR points per game, and 4.5 standard points per game. From a points per game perspective, he was wide receiver, 82 in PPR, 83 in half PPR, and 87 in standard. So, not the greatest of finish, but again, wasn't given the greatest chance, in my opinion. He only had 60 targets. Only had 40 receptions, 503 receiving yards, finishing 69th at wide receiver. Very nice. I like. Number 1 total touchdown. Just 1 total touchdown. So, not the greatest of rookie seasons. But again, how much can you project onto Pittman for that? Not very much. Wasn't given much of a chance with Phillip Rivers. But maybe he'll develop this connection with Carson Wentz. So, that's just what I think about it. I mean, again, once we get this preseason tape, once we're seeing, oh shit, looks like Wentz is targeting Pittman, I'm going to be all on board. But right now, there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. Not saying these guys are really any good around him. But again, maybe Perry Campbell is the wide receiver there in Indianapolis. Next up, we got Denzel Mimsy of the New York Football Jets. Now, Denzel Mims was one of my favorite wide receivers in the 2020 NFL Draft coming out of Baylor. 6'3", 207 pounds, 23 and a half years old. The oldest, I believe, of all the wide receivers we've touched upon thus far. 4'3", 840-yard dash. This guy is Lightning McQueen, fast as fuck. If you're not first, you're last. Ricky Bobby type deal. 95th percentile on that, 96th percentile speed score, 90th percentile burst score, 67th percentile agility score, and 96th percentile catch radius. So he's a beast. But not really given any opportunity last year. 45 targets for the New York Football Jets, 23 receptions, 357 receiving yards, no touchdowns, right? Nothing special out of Mims. But now the bad man is gone. Adam Gase is fucking gone. Hallelujah. It's raining men, as they would say. This is beautiful for Mims. Darnold is also gone. Now, I actually am on board with the Darnold is actually okay. Now, I'm not saying Sam Darnold is the second coming of Tom Brady or something, but what I'm saying is he's not terrible, right? He's not as dog water as we saw. Adam Gase is a certified fucking idiot, and now that he is gone, I think the door is really much open for Denzel Mims as the best wide receiver, in my opinion, on the New York Football Jets. Now, can they draft a receiver? Yes. But I still think that Mims will be the best wide receiver on this team. Their quarterback should be Zach Wilson out of BYU, who I am very comfortable will be able to air the ball out to Denzel Mimsy when he is open. So I'm very much on board with Mims going super late in these underdog drafts. Pick 140. He's a guy that I've drafted on a lot of my teams on there because, frankly, I just think the upside is tremendous for Denzel Mims. Next up, we have Henry Ruggs, and Henry Ruggs is a guy that I simply do not fucking trust at all. He is a Las Vegas Raider. First wide receiver off the board, which looks fucking dense when you saw those other guys who were really good drafted later. 5'11", 188 pounds, 22.2 years old, out of Alabama. Currently going off the board as pick number 134. Not very good. What's wrong with Henry Ruggs? Well, to me, Henry Ruggs is a very one-dimensional player. 100th percentile 40-yard dash, 4.27. This guy's fast as fuck. 91st percentile speed score, 98th percentile burst score. Very, very fast. But you're not seeing the plays drawn up for Ruggs that you need. You need to be able to get this guy open in space. So either you dump it to him, or he goes deep down the field. Fucking Tyreek Hill 2.0. You hoist it up to him. Derek Carr to Henry Ruggs, bang, tug, right? But we didn't see that at all last year. So I just don't know what to think. Like, I see the upside, but I don't see this being one of those players that you draft in like a regular fantasy league and you're fucking gonna be getting much production because he's gonna have like these games, right, where he just goes ham. He just takes his cock out and slaps the defense, fucking home run, drops like 30 points, and then there's gonna be other games where he scores like 4 points. That's the kind of player I see Ruggs being in the NFL. Does that mean that this guy's a bum? No. Doesn't mean he's a bum, but I just don't see him having very much fantasy value in 2021. Last year, had 26 receptions on 43 targets, 435 receiving yards, 2 total touchdowns. Nothing really special, and I don't even really see as much upside as I do in a guy like Mims or Pittman, who didn't put up a big 2020 campaign. Am I saying Ruggs is going to be terrible? No, but I just don't see him as being one of those really good fantasy players you want on a week-in, week-out standpoint. He was drafted basically to be Henry Ruggs, but we did not see anything, in my opinion, last year that would lead me to believe that this guy Henry Ruggs is Tyreek Hill Jr. So final player to talk about, Laviska Shenault, wide receiver of the Jacksonville Jaguars, drafted in the second round last year out of Colorado, 6'1", 227 pounds, 22 and a half years old. Now, I liked Laviska last year, and I like his role on this team, but do I like him as a fantasy redraft player? No. Going at pick 83 to me is ludicrous. They brought in Marvin Jones, they have DJ Chark, they have Laviska, and they're going to draft someone else. What's the point in drafting Laviska at pick 83? He had some good games last year, but I think with more competition at the wide receiver position, I don't think it's going to look as good for Laviska. I really do not. He is one of those players that's very interesting and very fun to watch. I have nothing against Laviska. I just don't think he's going to be the greatest fantasy asset. 79 targets last year, 52nd at wide receiver, 58 receptions, 42nd at wide receiver, 600 receiving yards, and 5 total touchdowns. Now, he's also able to acquire rushing yards as well. So he's pretty good at that, and he did that in college. And I think he's a fun player to watch, but I just don't think the fantasy value is really there in a redraft kind of league. Now, I could be wrong, because last year he played very well with not the greatest quarterback play. Should be Trevor Lawrence under center next year, but I'm just not all that sold in on Mr. Laviska out of Colorado, going at pick number 83 on Underdog right now. Make sure you guys check out Underdog. Again, best ball draft. They set up private games. I'm going to be hosting private games. Make sure you guys sign up. There will be more content on that on my channel in the future. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this 30-minute long masterpiece. Magnifique, as they would say in France. Thank you guys for watching. Leave the word dog somewhere in the comments. Dirty dog. Reverse. Nah, never mind. I almost just said reverse doggy, but I don't think that's a position. Just doggy is a position in the sex. Very nice. I like. So have a great rest of your guys' day. I love you guys all. Stay safe. Happy Monday, and we're going to have a beautiful Tuesday tomorrow. Titty Tuesday. Goodbye.